I want to pick up a small comment made by Andrew Norris, who says, Tim, I believe Sachs is referring to the transcript of the verbal agreement, which is present on US archive websites. Verbal agreements are legally binding, by the way. Verbal agreements are certainly legally binding when they are made by people who have the responsibility and the position to make those agreements. Now, while Gorbachov may have been able to speak on behalf of the entire Russian state, the agreement, I don't think, was made on behalf of the entire working concept of NATO. That would have required far many more people to approve. So the agreement we're talking about is NATO's apparent claim that it was not going to enlarge 1 inch to the east towards Russia, and that clearly hasn't happened. Now, I don't necessarily think the enlargement of NATO is a positive. If Russia hadn't been aggressive, then I don't imagine that the Baltic states would have wanted to have joined NATO, and I certainly don't imagine that Finland would have wanted to have joined NATO. Finland and Sweden were pushed into joining NATO because of what they saw Russia doing in terms of aggression against Ukraine. But a verbal agreement, yes, is absolutely binding, providing it's made by people who have the authority to make such an agreement, number one. Number two, I'm not certain that verbal agreement was a formal agreement. I'm not sure that verbal agreement actually existed. I haven't been able to find these so-called copies, transcripts of the verbal agreement present on US archive websites. I don't think, even if they are present on websites, that's not the place to put a verbal agreement, is it? The place to put a verbal agreement that's made about NATO would be in the NATO headquarters, not on some spurious website. I quite like spurious websites. I quite like Telegram channels. I follow Telegram channels from Ukraine and Russia, and I don't speak Russian terribly well now. I think the last time I had to speak Russian was in 2019, and I haven't really spoken it since. But I follow as best I can, and as a result, yes, I've looked at some interesting spurious websites which claim interesting things. But when I say, for example, that Putin is dead, you mock me, and you say, "Oh, where's your evidence?" Well, the evidence is as strong that Putin is dead as the evidence that you're waving around about this NATO agreement not to advance 1 inch to the east. Both of these bits of evidence are spurious and selective, and in my case, I put forward the idea of Putin's demise with amusement. In your case, you put forward the idea of this NATO undertaking not to enlarge with all seriousness. I don't quite understand. We should both be treating these spurious texts, these questionable sources, with the amusement that they deserve. The fact that I also think that it's highly likely that Putin is dead is my thought, is my opinion. It's not based on any sound source, because I agree the source is spurious and odd, and the fact that it's being quoted by many different newspapers and then suddenly ignored means a lot of people either have been warned off it or think that it's dodgy. I don't know. But whereas I can easily find the Telegram channel, the SVR thing, which says that Putin is dead, I can't find this this transcript of a verbal agreement, which you seem to think is so obvious and so easily identifiable and accessible on the internet, on US archive websites. I can't find it. So, I just thought that was an interesting parallel. And the degree of animosity, because I dared to question Professor Sachs, I find extraordinary. But I've looked at his speech in detail. I've analysed it in terms of logic and in terms of content and historical accuracy and referencing. I think there are problems in his speech, but instead I'm told I'm a fool, rather than that I'm examining the issue, rather than that I'm examining the speech and drawing different conclusions to uh, a number of commentators. And it's as if someone is trying to intimidate me. Now, who would try that?